Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Culture Wave Media Network. I am Darian Scalamoni, and this time we actually have something really exciting for you guys to check out. This is our first interview that I conducted during the TRIBECA Film Festival, which started on June 5th, and it's going to be going until June 16th. We're doing a lot of coverage for this festival, so please be sure to check that out. If you guys can, also please subscribe to our channel. We're on the road to 500 subscribers right now. Please give this video a like if you can and comment below. This film that I'm going to be talking about this docuseries I'm going to be talking about is called An Update with Our Family. And it's basically the story of these real life YouTube vloggers from earlier in the 2010s that had this scandal kind of surround their family when they decided to adopt a child from China. And it's a true crime tale. It's directed by Rachel Mason. It's executive produced by RACHAEL KNUDSEN, and I got a chance to interview both of them, so please check out that interview right now. A chance to screen the docuseries a few days ago. It was really compelling, really interesting stuff. I mean, we are a new company on YouTube, so it's kind of crazy to deal with something that is in that space, as well as trying to also make money and do our own thing on YouTube as our own new media company. And I'm just curious for you guys, what was it about the first time you saw the article that was written by Caitlin Moscatello that spoke to you guys that you knew you had to tell this story through this medium?
I guess I could go first since I was in the development process, and then, basically I got the article sent to me and it just blew my mind, but I had absolutely no context whatsoever because I never even so much as looked at YouTube family channels. I'm probably like the most outside of the community. I mean, I basically went to YouTube and kind of still do for like weird artists doing performances or like music videos. That was my entire YouTube vertical. And suddenly it was like, wow, this is a world unto itself. And truthfully, that was more interesting, if not just as interesting as the Stauffer story. I was thinking immediately, God, there must be so many crazy stories within this. And I hadn't even, sort of like scratching the surface. So feeling like the Stauffer story was just an entry point into this wild world. That was, for me at least, what was exciting. Love to hear Rachel's version of it, because I know after I looked at it, was handed over, and you jumped into what I had been preparing. So
I came on later, and I remember our first conversation, Rachel, is we started talking about like who is the audience of these of this world, and so I think that was something that I was just interested in immediately. Is we think about the people on the stage, so to speak, the family vloggers, but I was immediately interested of like, who are the people consuming this, and how that plays into ultimately what happened is what I was interested in.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. I love how you guys used Helen Cho as your central figure to sort of shape the story.
Hannah Cho.
Yeah, Hannah Cho. I'm sorry, Hannah Cho. How did you guys come to find Hannah, and how was it through her own fandom of the Stauffers and her relationship with the adoption process overall? Like, how did that help shape the overall vision for An Update on Our Family?
God, Hannah was the perfect, I mean, even to this day, it makes me amazed that somebody like her exists. Like, she had all the things we were looking for. I mean, love to hear your thoughts on this, Rachel, but my feeling when we finally found Hannah was, it was like so long coming. We were looking for somebody who could speak about the Stauffers with nuance. And that alone was really, really challenging because people were just so black and white about the Stauffers, or I mean, pretty much just all mostly hateful with very little nuance. And so to find somebody with nuance who herself was a transracial adoptee who also was a YouTuber, she just was the embodiment of every possible element of this. And seeing that she could really take us through the story because she herself followed along, but followed along from a place of really good faith. Like, she was into them and they were helping her. So it helped us to understand the kind of complexity of it. It's not such a two-dimensional story.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what I was saying before, is like our first conversation was like trying to find who were the not the haters of the Stauffer's, right? But who are the followers and the commenters. And after the scandal happened, it was really people that were maybe even still supporters of them or had followed them. We tried to, reach out to a lot of people, and they didn't, want to talk for fear of also being canceled. So it was really important for us as we were developing is to look at it in a holistic way, right? Is to try to find someone like Hannah. And so she had actually made a reaction video to the Stauffers that we had found. And when in her reaction video, she had talked about had followed them for years and everything. And then she mentioned that she was adopted. And, immediately we were like, oh my gosh, please, let's reach out to her. And hopefully she was actually one of the last people that, that we had found to participate. Mm-hmm. So it was like something that we'd been hunting for all along, because we knew it was so important in order to come to this story in a way that was it when a lot of people, when the story broke, the loudest voice in the room and the most present were all of, the people that were obviously outraged by what they're done and hurt by what they're done. What we had found is that most of those people had only seen 30-second clips of the Stauffers here and there, or had seen something else that somebody else retweeted and then got angry, and then that snowballs, right? And then so it was really hard to find somebody who had seen the swath of footage and really could come to it from the perspective of like the real-time feelings of what it felt like to see the story unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so much about like morality and the ethics of kind of what comes with what happened with the Stauffer family. So I thought it was great that you had somebody that had followed along their journey and also had come from that beginning that Hannah had come from, also being an adoptee and dealing with that whole thing. And she talked about some of the trauma that she dealt with as well. And she also brought up the addiction of YouTube and how there's like maybe to a larger degree accessibility to everything and why that could be problematic, because it's similar. She compared it to gambling, which a lot of people struggle with addiction in that way. So I just kind of wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on the YouTube space and the role of content in general, and how that has like in relation to addiction and trauma for other people, and how you guys saw that throughout this docuseries as well.
I would say one of the things that, well, first off, I'm very proud of the team effort that came together to make this film, because really, like, when you look at this series, there was so much footage to look through. It's not like, when you make a documentary, there's usually kind of a amount of footage that you've shot and you put together. But when you're dealing with this type of content, our team, Rachel Knudsen had to really kind of lead the charge, almost like an anthropologist, diving into just layers and tiers and then comments and then timelines, and making sure that like all the different possible avenues and stones that didn't get unturned, we had to look under every possible corner of it. But with YouTube content, there are people just constantly making this content and then people reacting to it. And so this ecosystem was sort of like our raw material to work with. And as a documentary and as a TV producer, like, this is a uniquely difficult and kind of massive endeavor to tell a story in this almost like three-dimensional Tetris kind of a way. And so I think our team really it was incredible the amount of work that went into the spreadsheets and all of it. And I'm kind of answering your question by saying that in order to so much as figure it out, you kind of also had to unpack some of the layers of content. And I think through it, we realized like, oh, this is such a fascinating ecosystem, because, Myka made a video with like a pregnancy dance. Maybe that would like lead us into a territory where like all these people commented on it, ridiculed her eventually for it, but all these people also do it over here, and it's kind of a thing. And so then there's all these other tiers to telling the story, which we realized in the Stauffer story, there's a pressure cooker, and that never got acknowledged in a lot of the media about the Stauffers. that they were just like this couple who did this thing and then they fell off the deep end. But if you actually, when you watch the series, there's a whole story that exists when you understand that, to your point about YouTube and content and, the gambling effect or whatever it is, it's like this whole ecosystem with pressures around people, and the choices they make get affected by it. And it's like that idea I kept thinking, when this is like a physics concept, that when something is observed, it actually changes. And that really is the case in YouTube. You're being observed, and then your content changes in relation to what you're observing, what's being observed. And so when you have the mountain of comments of people talking about life decisions like a child, that is where the danger lies for family channels, and that's the kind of edge that they're on. And yet, are they terrible people, or are they people that have just found themselves almost accidentally in some cases in this, this thing that they started off doing kind of randomly, like as a side gig or a hustle or whatever, suddenly like snowballed. In a lot of cases, we realized things were happening that they accelerated, and suddenly we're, 10 steps ahead of where they could really understand where they were. And by that point, you have a giant audience following you. So I know I've answered the question in this larger way, but I think the ecosystem of it all is part of what was so complicated about making what seemed like a really straightforward story into something where we understand the human experience at the center of it, which is totally tethered to the YouTube creator world.
Yeah, the phrase that comes to mind when I think about like the comparison of gambling and just social media in general is the house always wins, right? And like thinking about how in relationship to the Stauffers, or really anybody who experiences has a scandal in front of everyone, they were, throughout the whole scandal, they were the ones that were the target. Although, as we know, YouTube, Dreft, Dannon, or all these different sponsors that benefited monetarily from Huxley, from a lot of these other the children. The house wins. They were the ones that really were making the millions and millions and millions of dollars. Do the families, are they responsible for their own footage? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, who were the ones that with the target? And so I think that one of the things that we talked about all the time was looking up, scaling back. Like at the end of the day, everyone put a target on the Stauffers, and did that really change this ecosystem? Did that change in a big way, or did we just look at this one family, put a target on them, and then move on? And that's what I think about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For my last question for you guys, I just wanted to ask about both of maybe your own internal conflict of that feeling of closure for Huxley that your subjects had talked about at the end of the series, since you're obviously now so closely associated with this like tragic tale that was playing out in real time in public over years of time. How do you both feel about the outcome that you got in the research of it and the completion of the docuseries in general?
Yeah, I would say, the human side of it is probably the hardest for me personally. As a director, a lot of things I continue to do have a very personal feeling. And, we met real family channel vloggers who I came to appreciate deeply. I thought they were all trying their hardest to raise their kids and do their thing, and they were on this precarious ecosystem. And we also met people in the adoption community, as you see in the series, and understanding the amount of research that's still needing to be done to just understand all that has gone into many sides of adoption. It's still this sort of unknown. On some level, we have multiple unknowns. And I think in some ways, for me personally, I have a feeling of sadness and compassion for pretty much everyone in it, but no one more, I would say, than the kids who did, I do think, really seriously get hurt by this, and it saddens me and it pains me, and I actually name and feel very strongly about the Stauffer kids, and I felt like there was not ever enough grace extended to them, you know, and I believe strongly that Huxley is deserving of all the grace in the world, and his story is so heartbreaking. It's mind-blowingly heartbreaking, but in our research, we actually met an adult woman who herself had come from a dissolved adoption, and her story didn't make it into our film, but her hearing what it was like for a person to almost kind of like be the Huxley who went from one house to another, and then tell us about that second house where she was loved and we met the mom and she actually was living kind of a great life. There was some hope there. So I felt good about knowing, like, okay, there are adoption stories that end well when a person has been quote unquote rehomed, which is a word nobody likes to use. But you know, the reality is appreciating Huxley, and of course that's not his current name, but appreciating him as a person in the world who's deserving of privacy is what I think we all came down to. Like, but also the Stauffer's children equally deserving of that privacy, especially knowing that their parents went through this ordeal. Those kids went through an ordeal too. And I think that's where, for me, there was a sense that there wasn't enough grace paid to them, because even though whatever you want to say about their parents, you can feel a lot of feelings, those kids truly were not deserving of that vitriol from the internet, and they were thrust right into it. And so for me, this series re-exposing the family to the trauma is part of the one thing that I do feel a moral qualm about. You know, I'm not gonna lie, it does make me nervous. Like, I really do hope for the best for the Stauffers to go on with their lives and move forward.
Yeah, I think that Hannah said at the very end that to way to anybody who hasn't seen it yet, but everyone wants, you know, this nice. Sorry, I got a little frog in my throat. This perfect little bow, you know, at the end. When you think about the ending of a story, you want usually an ending to the story, and I think that the natural question people have is that, like, okay, well, is Huxley safe? Is, you know, it, and I think what Rachel just said about, you know, privacy at the very end being it is we're now in a moment in time where, like, I think everyone, whether you have a family vlog or, you know, family vlog channel or not, we're all kind of thinking about privacy, how much we share online, what sort of ramifications does it have. You know, the Stauffers, they started vlogging 10 years ago. The landscape was also very different then than it is now. So I think that in terms of like the ending of our story, I think that that's really just the beginning of like this next phase of a conversation, right? Of like us, of like, how much do we want to share? And at the flip side, you know, I just became a mom this last year. And I also have so much compassion about community for mothers, community for families. We live in a nuclear separated family, you know, system right now, where it's really hard to find community. And where is that community around? Online. And also on the flip side of that, our economy sucks. And you know, housing is very expensive, dual household income, no maternity leave. And so the idea of like going online to have Dana and her Pampers pays money to be a stay-at-home mom, I can also empathize with that, right? So I think that this story, the way that you know, we all were really interested in telling it is that it's so complex, it's so timely right now, even though that this happened a handful of years ago. This is like questions and stuff we're figuring out right now that we need to kind of dig into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really want to just add to that. I think, you know, I'm also a mom, and I was realizing that there were things that when I was, you know, just the basic things you don't know about at all. And the hospital tells you one little thing, like, okay, here's the manual for like breastfeeding. But then you go online, and in a way, I started realizing from this series, wow, these women sharing this, I mean, you could say oversharing, but whatever it is, they're really a resource, and they're talking about the difficulty of things that like a lot of women also struggle to find other people to talk about, like breastfeeding is not easy. Who knew? People, and if you read the books, it says it should be great, but in fact, maybe it's hard for you. And so you have a community of people that fertility, so many different pieces of life that are kind of hard to talk about. Some of these YouTubers really bravely speak about it and openly. And, I can say for certain, I was definitely one of the audience members. When I learned about stuff, I'd be like, wow, I'm so glad I'm hearing about it. Am I going to be a fan and follow every day? No, but like, I really was grateful for some of those videos. And I know internally in our team, we shared things that we thought were really cool and kind of incredible. And I definitely think as women, there's still a curve, finding your way towards being a professional, being a mom, balancing the things that still exist in our society as far as gender, inequality. And I think there is the space for that dialogue, and it is the positive side of what we can see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you guys were able to really capture something that is very significant and timely, as in what is happening in our society in general, plus what has been happening on YouTube for a number of years. When this story broke and the article came out, when the Stauffers were popular on YouTube, I was graduating high school. So I hadn't even heard about this. And this is such an interesting perspective to sort of see, because I'm aware of the family vlogging sort of space as well. Just at a glance, my mother has been a babysitter for 30 years. So much of like what her life is being surrounded by children. And it's so interesting because even like when she understood the rise of YouTube and things like that, she was always confused on like, oh, well, like I'm interested on why people are sharing everything with everybody. So it's very unique. It's a very interesting story. I recommend everybody that is watching this to check out an update on our family when it is released. Do you guys have, I know you guys are working with Vox. Is this going to be online, or is this going to be on a streaming service or somewhere else? Are you guys working on selling it?
As far as we know, there's not a distribution plan right now, but we're in the process of finding a distribution partner. And so we're really excited for everyone to see it, though, for sure.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. For everybody, check out this interview. I'm so lucky to talk to the director and the executive producers of this docuseries. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here at Culture Wave, and I really appreciate the time.
This is The Culture.